All sports, all plays. Yeah. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you to the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, they working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays. Yeah.
All right. What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Drawing and Balling with the gentlemen ourselves. Of course, as always, I got Amon with me. Amon, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm living a dream, sir. Joe, we got Joe. Luckily, we thought for a second there we weren't going to have Joe. We just got a very cryptic message like Aaron Rodgers. He's like, going without me. Amon and I were very confused. We're like, what has happened to Joe? Okay. Joe, how are you, man?
I'm doing fine. Listen, family comes first. Unless I can pass it off to somebody else, then you guys come first.
Exactly. And I'll be 100% honest with y'all. If nobody has ever, if people have watched the show and you wonder why I have a mustache, I'm actually playing in a very B-rated copy of Super Troopers with a website that is, in black and gold that we're not going to disclose because this is a family show. We're not going to go into that. Which I know Joe is like, that is such bull crap.
I will keep my mouth shut.
But obviously, we unfortunately we didn't get to talk about it last show, but we do need to talk about kind of a significant NFL move here, considering the fact of everything that's happened to this man and that there's still an organization that is, quote, willing to take a chance on him, considering all the things that are happening right now. And that is Brian Flores being hired on with the Steelers to serve as, if I remember right, it's a defensive advisor. If I remember right,
Senior defensive assistant, I believe, was his official title.
Okay, so it's like you,
and then linebackers coach.
Yeah, which I'm like just make him the defensive coordinator. Like just do it. Like you cut the middleman out. Don't worry about all the fancy. Just be like, yeah, he's gonna be our defensive coordinator. Like whoever is there, you're fired. It's Brian Flores now. Amon, I'll start with you. Do you think this kind of helps him further solidify? No matter how this whole lawsuit thing goes, if he drops the lawsuit, if he doesn't, do you think this solidifies his chance to just be like, hey, while everything is going on, I'm still one hell of a coach, and all you organizations are passing up the opportunity to be successful with me running the ship?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And he's keeping himself in the game. I think that's a very important part. Sometimes coaches, they leave and they get kind of stagnant. They get stuck in their old ways, and he's finding ways to continue to adapt to a new system in Pittsburgh that he hasn't been in, with new players, new personnel, new coaches. And I think the more you can learn, the better you'll be just in your overall life. And that's a rule of life, career, no matter what it is. I think Einstein had the quote, if you're not learning, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're just going to be stale. And that's kind of how it is in the NFL. If you're not learning, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're not doing anyone any good. I think for Brian Flores, you go into Pittsburgh, you say, look, I'm trying to be here, learn. And I think he's going to do a good job. I mean, we know that he's going to pretty much be in control of that defense. He's got TJ Watt in that linebackers room, so not much wrong can go wrong there. So I like the move from Brian Flores. Go in. Also, the Rooney Rule comes from Art Rooney, so it makes a lot of sense to go in there and, be in a place that historically has been a little bit more progressive in their head coaching hires. So I think it's a great move for Brian Flores to keep himself in the game and to keep himself say, hey, look, I'm still available if you want me as a head coach.
So when I said that, I kind of had a little bit of a crazy realization, because we think about how long Mike Tomlin has been the head coach of the Steelers now. He's been the head coach of the Steelers for a very, very long time, since 2004, if I remember right, 2005?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was Ben's second Super Bowl is when he became head coach.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been a head coach for a long time. He's never had a losing season. He's the second longest tenured coach, right behind Bill Belichick being with one team. Do you think that, given the fact that now Pittsburgh is kind of heading down this dark path of now for the first time in like 20 years, they don't have a franchise quarterback anymore? We don't necessarily think Mason Rudolph is the answer. We don't think Dwayne Haskins is the answer. And it's not like there's a whole lot of great college quarterbacks coming out of this particular draft. So, Joe, I'm going to ask you, do you think at some point this could just kind of be the perfect transition of if Mike Tomlin decides, I don't want to go out on a bad way, I want to go out at least on a high note, never have a losing record. He can say he's done. He could potentially go to another team, maybe do something else, take his talents elsewhere, kind of solidify his. And then the Steelers can say, hey, we have another great coach, another great defensive coach that we think can still continue to keep the franchise afloat and relevant. And do you think they could eventually hand the keys over to Brian Flores, and then he takes over one of the most really stable franchises in NFL history?
I think that would be the worst thing that could possibly happen. I would actually consider that a nuclear option. I think the reason for that is number one, we've only seen 3 head coaches in the past, 45, 50 years of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We went from Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher to Mike Tomlin. If you look around, they did not promote from within. Now, they were close after Cowher left. I think it was Mike Munchak was maybe the guy who was the front runner for the job, and then Tomlin came in and got it. But they usually go outside of the system. I think that this is actually a bad move for Brian Flores. It feels a little bit too much on point. I agree with him on. He needs to stay in the league. He is obviously beyond qualified to coach anything on defense. Like, to me, there's Raheem Morris and there's Brian Flores. You know, if you want to talk about guys who just can really any level of the defense, you know, whether it's linebackers, secondary, defensive coordinators, they can coach it all. Really, really well respected and knowledgeable guys. But it's a little too on the point. We're coming into draft season. You ever see like, oh, the prospect with the team match, and it's just a little too perfect. And then when they don't go together, you're like, well, that's kind of a good thing, because it almost seems like there'd be too much pressure. Like, Mike Tomlin is one of only 2 African-American coaches. Yes, Mike McDaniel is a minority, but he is of
3.
But
don't forget Lovie Smith.
I'm saying 2. Lovie Smith and Mike Tomlin. But Mike McDaniel is another minority, but not trying to, get into a whole debate about semantics, but like, Mike McDaniel does not look like Mike Tomlin or Lovie Smith. Fair, unfair. So again, like, I think it's fine. My question would be this: what does Brian Flores want to get out of this? Because we've seen guys get hired out of non-coordinator positions. We've seen it from the McVay tree on offense, where guys who are offensive coordinators or offensive passing assistants or whatever get hired. Mike Tomlin was, I believe, the defensive backs coach from Minnesota and got hired to Pittsburgh. Like, we've seen guys get jobs from this. He's not going to give up the lawsuit. He's not going to do this. My biggest thing is him being in Pittsburgh is one benefit, and one benefit only. If him and Mike Tomlin are able to have a sit-down, real open and honest conversation with the Rooney family and be like, you're part of the league. You're one of the 32 that we're suing, or that he's suing. What do you see as a solution? What do you see is the problem? Like, you didn't ask that the rule be named after you, but obviously when people hear the Rooney Rule, they know what it's about. So I think that access is really good and really important. But again, he kind of limited himself where he was going to go. He's obviously not going to go to any of the teams that he interviewed for. He wasn't going to go in the Belichick tree. So take the Raiders off, because McDaniels is there. Even a guy like Shanahan, who I think he would work really well in San Francisco. Shanahan is a really close friend of Bill Belichick. So I'm sure Flores looked at that and said no. So really his options were very small and limited when you look at the scope around the league. And I think he was smart to take this, but I don't like it.
Yeah, and I kind of agree, because I kind of agree that with Amon and the fact of, I think he needed this, because I think this is where, and I don't want to dive too deep into the Colin Kaepernick thing, but I think with Kaepernick, the big thing was he started to focus more on the issue that he was trying to get awareness of, rather than trying to balance what he was doing in the league and his play, as well as the message he was trying to send. And I think he let his play start to deteriorate. And had he not done that, I think he could have stayed in the league and continued to put his message, somewhere at whatever team would have taken him for his services. Mm-hmm. I think Brian Flores doing this is starting to show that. Now, my big thing is can he continue that? Can he continue to show, while yes, I am fighting this in the background, yes, I am dealing with the lawsuit, I'm still able to coach a phenomenal team with great talent? Because like Amon said, you do have TJ Watt, you get Minkah Fitzpatrick back, who they traded while you were there. So you do have a good secondary piece at least, as well as a great linebacker. You know, well, I think it is a little bit beneath him to, basically go back to, not even really being a full coordinator, just being, an assistant
Position
coach.
coach, yeah.
Yeah. I do think, it keeps his name relevant. It keeps him out there, and it gives him a chance, because somebody's going to be like, well, despite all this, some franchise somewhere, and I hope to God for his sake, it's not Jacksonville, it's not Detroit, it's not New York, is going to say, we really want this guy as our head coach because we want to win. We want to have some type of success. And for him, I think if he can continue to do that and just show, hey, I can still coach my ass off and I can still be a great coach, that somebody's going to be like, you know what, screw it. We're going to take this guy, issues or no issues, off the field, and we're going to support him 100% because he deserves to be able to run a franchise.
And let's not forget either, like he is as focused on the defense as anybody in the league. Like we saw the game plan that he and Belichick came up with against the Rams in the Super Bowl, but he's not above pettiness either. Don't forget, when he was the coach in Miami, I believe it was Kenny Stills was wide receiver, and he was kind of in a beef with, I think, a rapper, and he was playing that rapper's music during practice. And somebody asked him about it. He goes, listen, I don't pick the music, man. And everybody kind of knew, like, yeah, but you do. Like, we can support him in his cause. We can respect him in his ability on the defense. But we can also say, yeah, but you're kind of a prick too.
Yeah, but I mean, to be honest with you too, and I kind of agree with what people were saying when they were talking about, sometimes people respond to that negatively. Sometimes they respond positively. To be honest with you, I think sometimes that causes guys to respond the best. Like I get being a player's coach, and I also get, the old school kind of stern coach, but you got to have a balance a lot of times, because if you don't have a balance, that's when you start to fail, because either you're too soft, and you basically get fired because you're not hard enough to get the best out of the players, or you're a Matt Patricia and you think the Patriot way, the exact copy of it, is how this works, even though you don't have guys there that are really true team leaders and true team impact players and can really help kind of convey that message in your locker room. Like you don't have a Tom Brady, you don't have a Wes Welker, you don't have these guys that have had actual success for 10 years with somebody that not only implemented this, but has shown that it can work. Matt Patricia is just a crappy copycat that can't work. So yeah, that to me, I would say, is my big thing. And I know Brian, and I think Brian does have a good balance of that. I just think for the whole Miami thing, on top of the extra stuff that went on, I think once he gets more of a say in what he wants, because obviously he has an eye for talent, because he said, hey, I want Justin Herbert, not Tua. If I'm a franchise, I'm going to be like, I want that guy.
Speaking of Matt Patricia, somebody told me a joke a long time ago. It says Matt Patricia is what happens when Eric Mangini can't control his diabetes, which is just a really mean joke.
I mean, you're not wrong, though. You're not wrong.
Amon doesn't want to say anything.
That is brutal. That is brutal.
I mean, just think, you give Matt Patricia a few years, he gets that white beard. I'm going to start calling him Wilford Brimley.
Oh my God.
Because he has diabetes. He puts the D in Detroit and diabetes. So don't worry. So we'll move to college a little bit. And obviously this is something that it broke a year ago. I actually put this out on my own personal podcast and kind of gave an idea about it. So obviously Texas and Oklahoma University are joining the SEC in football and college basketball. So out of those two sports, Joe, I'll start with you. Do you think Texas or Oklahoma can potentially win either basketball or football title in the SEC? Now, that can be long-term, that can be immediate, or do you think they both made a huge mistake trying to see if they can hang with the big boys, try to, revamp their market? And do you think they're ultimately probably just going to try to go back to the Big 12 or another division at some point?
Well, I think two things can be true. I think they've made a huge mistake by making this decision. We talked about it, the last show a little bit about like what's going on, who's going to be the best team with the Big 12, while also referencing this move of Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. But here's the thing about it. again, like, it's a bad decision right now. In 5 years, how do we know that there's not going to be 3 super conferences and they would eventually ended up there anyway? How do we know that the NIL deals basically just become like a salary cap where every school is limited to a certain amount? So for right now in this, can they win a title? Sure. How do we know they can win a title? Because when we look at the final 4 schools, the final 5 schools for wish lists of football, a lot of them are Texas and Oklahoma. So we know guys are at least considering it. In basketball, let's not forget, Kevin Durant went to Texas. They have a history of success in Texas. And if you go to the SEC, which is really a powerhouse in basketball, I'm not even sure who the last SEC school to win a title is. What, Arkansas? I mean,
Kentucky.
with Kentucky. I'm sorry, Kentucky.
Yeah. Kentucky.
Okay, so aside from Kentucky, who's in the SEC?
Yeah, true. I mean, if you think about it, really, basketball is where a lot of these SEC teams, if they don't do great in football, they succeed in basketball.
It's one or the other.
Tennessee, Auburn, Kentucky, at least this year, those are your 3 big SEC teams that are absolutely killing. I mean, Bama, kind of. They've been in and out of like the top 25, but really, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Auburn have been your big 3, at least college-wise, in the SEC.
So can Texas jump in there if they get another recruit like a Durant with the NIL deals? We know what's the thing about Texas. They've got unlimited amounts of money to throw around, whether it be for coaching, the NIL deals, all that stuff. So when these kids start coming up, the next Zion Williamson, the next RJ Barrett, the next, whoever, James Wiseman, whoever you want to, talk about, when those guys come up, Texas has the pocketbook, and I'm sure Oklahoma does too. They've got a lot, but like, that's when I think of big money in college athletics, I think of USC, I think of Texas. Those are schools that I think of that just seem to have unlimited amounts of money to throw at whatever problem they have. And going to the SEC is going to be a problem, and they're going to throw money at it.
Yeah. And I would say too, I think a lot of what helps with schools like Texas, Oklahoma, USC is, even though they're maybe not as relevant today as they were back in the day, the back in the day is what they're really going off of. Because you think about, pre 2009, who was probably your 2 biggest schools that were almost always contending for a championship and were almost always relevant? Texas and Oklahoma, because you had players like Vince Young, for football. You had, you had Earl Thomas playing for Texas. You had AP for, Oklahoma. You had Sam Bradford. Like, you had a lot of big name players coming out of this, making impacts, at least just on the football side. And then, like you said, Joe, you have Kevin Durant, at least just for Texas. I know there's a big Oklahoma name.
Blake Griffin went to Oklahoma, didn't he?
Blake Griffin.
Trae Young also went to Oklahoma.
Yeah, Trae Young.
So, I mean, again, right there, you're talking, there's 3 names when you look at the past 15, 20 years of basketball. I mean, obviously Trae Young is still young, Blake Griffin, but like, they're name recognition. People know who they are.
Exactly. And yeah, so to me, I think that's what they bank on a lot. Same with USC. I mean, you look at all the players that come at USC, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Carson Palmer, and those are just, I don't really want to say recent names, but I mean, they're probably the names that either had the most college success or had the most NFL success.
Keyshawn Johnson was on the cover of Sports Illustrated with the big number 1, going to USC. Like,
and I mean, even though we probably think he's a bust, Sam Darnold came from USC, and I mean, he was a top draft pick, a few years ago.
Smith-Schuster came from USC.
Yeah, Juju. So, Amon, do you think that out of these 2 teams right now, and to me, I feel like Oklahoma took the biggest hit because they lost Lincoln Riley, which was a big attraction name, and then you have all these 5-star athletes decommitting from Oklahoma and going to USC. Which school do you think makes an immediate impact right now as is?
In the football world, can I say none of the above? I don't think there's really a team that's going to make a splash. Again, I don't know what Quinn Ewers is going to translate into in college football, but I know he's not going to turn Texas football around just like that. I think in the long run, Oklahoma might actually be better off without Lincoln Riley. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but they go and get Brett Venable, right, who is a defensive guy. And I think that's the one thing Oklahoma's always struggled with. Defensively, they've never been very good. And I'm not saying Brent is going to fix the entirety of that defense, but I think there'll be a little bit more focus on that defensive side of things. I think in the short term, you're going to lose the 5-star quarterbacks. Hell, you lost 2 of them in the span of like 2 months. You lost Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams. Like that doesn't happen, right? Both were number 1 in their recruiting class, and you lost both within a couple months. So you're going to struggle in the short term if you're Oklahoma, but at least in the SEC, where defense is going to matter. The trenches are going to matter. I have a little bit more faith in Oklahoma, say the next 5 years, than I would say Texas.
Yeah, and I could agree with that. And I would argue that really for a lot of the Big 12 teams. Like when you think of Big 12 teams, you don't really think of defense. You think of the Big 12 as more of one of those. You have a high-powered, air-raiding offense. You look at Oklahoma the last few years. You had Marquise Hollywood Brown. You had CeeDee Lamb. You had Jalen Hurts. You had Baker. You had Kyler. You had
Colt McCoy right before Lincoln got there.
No, Colt McCoy was Texas.
Texas.
No, then who am I thinking?
Yeah. So I mean, you have these high impact players that are just speedsters killing it down the field.
You might be thinking of Jason White, Amon. He won the Heisman out of Oklahoma, didn't he?
It might have been that. Jeez.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm old. That's a guy I know. Shut up.
I know, boomer. Since we got to incorporate that more in the show. Yeah. To me, I think Oklahoma in the short term, but I'm actually going to go the opposite. I think Texas for the long term. And I say that because really the only big Texas school you have in the SEC is Texas A&M. Now, to Texas A&M's defense, they are actually pretty consistent. And I think that's because, if you're a college recruit, and especially if you want to stay close to home now that, there's the internet, you have Instagram, you have more options to go to these different schools. It's like, if I want to stay close to home, if I'm in Texas and I want to go, but I want to compete in like basically a mini NFL, I want to go to the SEC. So I'm going to go to Texas A&M. And I think Texas could actually hurt them a little bit because now you have two options. You can go to Texas A&M, which is kind of up and down, or you can go to Texas, which, like Joe said, you're going to have a crap ton of money. You're going to have some of the best facilities, and it's a big brand name. It's going to be out there. Everybody knows Texas. Everybody knows, Hook 'em Horns. Everybody knows Longhorn name. So I think long-term it can happen, but let's also be realistic. Until Nick Saban either dies or retires, the SEC is just Alabama's play toy. Unfortunately, that's just the realism of the game. Is it's just Alabama's play toy, unfortunately.
You were talking about the Big 12 and basically the way that they're designed, and it made me think of two video games that were very different in the way that the NFL was portrayed. One was NFL 2K, if you can remember that. That was kind of the last really competitor with Madden. They were actually outselling Madden for a period of time, but they were an offensive-driven game. Like, there are things like you could literally throw for 10,000 yards in a season because that was the way the game was designed. So that was the Big 12. And then NFL Blitz reminds me of the SEC, where it's just literally defense, and once in a while you're going to get a big play. Like, they're just two vastly different conferences. And I think that Texas never seemed to fit into the modern Big 12. They just always felt like an SEC team. They didn't feel like a good SEC team, but they felt like an SEC team. And Oklahoma is the embodiment of the Big 12. So I don't know what they think they're doing. Like, I don't know. And
I would almost say it's kind of surprising too that the two schools that are probably one of the biggest rivalries in college football is like, hey, you know what we should do together? We should go to a harder conference together. Like, who needs the Big 12? And, I guess Oklahoma would almost be like the big brother, and you've got Texas. It's like, yeah, let's go. And okay.
You sure?
I guess you can come with me. You didn't really do great here, but okay. Like, that's kind of how I pictured that conversation in my head. It's just, okay, Texas, if you want.
Texas is literally Matthew McConaughey from Dazed and Confused. You know what I like about these universities? I keep getting worse and they keep staying the same way.
All right. Like, yeah, that's exactly what that reminds me of.
Amon's like, I don't know that movie.
I don't know that movie. I know all right, but I don't know that movie. I'm gonna be honest.
Come on, Amon. Now you're making me feel old, man. Like, like I just turned 27, Amon. You can't be making.
You're talking about pre-2009. Again, I don't remember a time where Texas or USC were good. Like, I remember a KD a couple years ago when they went to Brooklyn, or like, I don't remember when the Knicks were good. It's like I don't remember when Texas or USC were good.
Mon, it was my birthday yesterday, so I'm just getting like late birthday presents at this point. This is the worst birthday present ever.
I'm so
You
sorry.
just said that.
If you're going to call me a boomer, can I at least call him a spooner because I have to feed him all the information about stuff before he was born, you know.
Boomer Spooner. There we go.
Boomer Spooner. That's
Off-brand Oklahoma. Speaking of Oklahoma, we're going to go to an old Oklahoma, probably old for Amon, Oklahoma quarterback in Kyler Murray. Do you think he should get extended? Because he obviously had this weird thing. He's like, I'm going to unfollow Arizona. I'm going to remove all my photos. But then, no, Arizona, I'm completely committed to you. I want to be paid my third year of my rookie contract. I want big money. I can be the leader of this franchise. And then sends them this really long, detailed explanation of why he deserves to be paid. And Arizona hasn't responded, and it's been a week. So, Joe, I'll start with you. Should they even keep Kyler, or should they move on? Now, the other thing is, so they've extended Cliff Kingsbury to 2027.
And Steve Keim, the GM, yeah.
And Cliff and Kyler both have the same agent. So, like how bad is it going to be if Cliff is like, hey, man, you need to extend it. And then he's like, nah, Kyler, they're going to say no. You're going to be like, wait, what the hell you mean no? How do you get the coach extended, but I don't?
Let's just say they're not going to be exchanging pleasantries in the agent's office for the next couple of months. Listen, this is such a Spooner story. This is something like, oh, I'm going to unfollow them on all the social media. Oh, I'm going to put out a release by my agent saying the two things I want most are to be an Arizona Cardinal long-term and to win the Super Bowl. Just once, I'd like to see an NFL quarterback come out and be like, you know what? I want to get rich and screw the rest of y'all, which is basically what Aaron Rodgers has tattooed on his forehead. But I know, I already got the Rodgers digging, but listen, it comes down to this. In the last 10 years, there have been 6 quarterbacks who, after their third year, were extended for long-term. Those quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson, Ryan Tannehill. It's escaping me now. It was Ryan Tannehill. Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. So you really have a 50-50 shot with this. The question Arizona has to ask themselves is, does he have the upside of a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, aside from the legal trouble, or is he Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, or Ryan Tannehill in Miami? He falls apart at the end of the season. I shouldn't say he does. The team does. Cliff Kingsbury does in his play calling. The defense does. The offense does. Now, part of it's injuries. Part of it is bad luck. He looked like a lost puppy in the playoff game. He looked like he forgot how to play football. I came up with a contract extension that if I'm the Arizona Cardinals, and I'll put this out there to you guys, and then you can take with it as you wish. If I'm Arizona, I call him, I call his agent and say, listen, I have one offer for you. We're not talking about a contract extension until next year. You can take this or leave this. This is the deal. 6 years, $225 million, between 105 and 115 in guarantees, and we'll give you $70 million up front within the first year of signing. That's the deal. If you don't like it, then we'll talk to you next year. But we're not playing this pissing match back and forth between, for the whole season. He's 3 years in. He has one season with a winning record, which has been this season. Stats and advanced stats show that he is a middle-of-the-road quarterback. Now, 70 touchdown passes, 20 rushing touchdowns in his first 3 years, never been done by another quarterback. We know what he can be. But contracts aren't about what you were. They're about what you can be. Can Kyler Murray get taller? No. Can he get healthier? Probably not. So the question that Arizona has to ask is, what are we getting out of an investment? And nobody knows that answer.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing too is that like you said, he finally got a winning record out of this year, and whether that's coaching, whether that's the team, and I think that's kind of the other big surprise is it kind of reminds me, as much as I hate to make the comparison, it kind of reminds me of Dallas. Like they acquired all of this talent. They had, you think of their wide receiver core this year is DeAndre Hopkins, who's AJ Green, who now he's not the AJ Green we know, in years past, but it's not like he wasn't good. he had the one screw up against the Packers, but everybody has at least one. And then you have Christian Kirk, who you put him in the slot, and it's not like he's been bad for the 4 years he's been with Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Then they went out and they got him Zach Ertz at tight end, and you still have a very good defense. And then you also have Edmonds and Connor as your running game. Now, offensive line, they retooled a little bit. They got Rodney Hudson. I think they got another offensive lineman. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I think they did.
No, they did. They got a couple off. Rodney Hudson was the big one, but yeah, they got a couple guys.
So I mean, you think about it. To me, it's like, okay, they gave Kyler the tools to be better, and that's part of why they won. And so it's like, okay, we've seen the more talent you give him, the better he can do. And like Joe said, 70 passing touchdowns, 20 rushing. But the big thing is injuries. I think unfortunately Kyler may or may not fall a little bit victim to what happened to RG3. I think he's so talented and so athletic, and he tries to do so much, and he's not protecting himself. Like that would I say, and I know Joe is probably going to be a little salty about this. So I'm going to try not to touch on this too much. I would say that is the one success that Russ has had, is given the fact that Russ is a mobile quarterback. And Joe, you can probably admit this. This is really the first year we've seen Russ be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's been in the league 10 years, and this is the first time he's ever hurt. And it wasn't even like it was a blow to his legs, it's blow to his throwing hand. So that is a big deal. And so to me, I think if I'm Arizona, I would honestly pitch that. I wouldn't even give him a contract yet. I would say, hey, look, this is a salary cap driven league. There are going to be other quarterbacks that are going to get paid. Aaron Rodgers is pretty much really the dam that's holding back all these free agency moves, all these contract moves on what happens. And then if I remember right, I think Lamar still has to get paid.
Lamar.
Yep.
Yeah. They're still trying to hammer it out. Yep.
So that's going to be your other comparison. So really, if I'm Kyler, why do you want a contract now? Like, wait until those are settled, because you see what Patrick Mahomes got, you see what Dak got, you see what you see what the market is going to be for you. The number is going to continue to grow. You're going to get your money. Whether or not it's from Arizona or not, that's an entirely different story. They may not, but you could potentially go to another team, even if, say, it's Washington. So hypothetically, say Washington is able to trade for Aaron Rodgers. Do you think Aaron Rodgers has another 2 years in him?
At best.
Yeah. By then, hey, Kyler, you could be a free agent. Go to Washington. Maybe they'll be a little bit different. Maybe they could be better because they tool everything around Aaron. Maybe they build around that. So that to me is what I would do if it was me. And Amon, I feel like I almost cut you off on this because I didn't even give you a chance on this one. Do you think that there's a ceiling on Kyler? Do you think that there comes a point where Arizona's only ever going to be able to do so much? Because you got to think about it. You give somebody DeAndre Hopkins and you can't succeed with him. That to me is kind of a red flag. You give him a better offensive line, and it's not like Arizona has, in the last 3 or 4 years has had a terrible defense. So that's kind of my second red flag. So do you think that Arizona should move on from him and maybe try something else?
Absolutely not. Are we kidding ourselves? Look, Kyler, is he Patrick Mahomes? No. But is he the other quarterbacks that the Cardinals have drafted in the first round, a.k.a. Jake Plummer, a.k.a. Matt Leinart, a.k.a. Josh Rosen? No. Look, if he wants to go get his money in a long-term deal, how about we do the Patrick Mahomes contract? Don't give him $500 million, but lay it out so his first 2 years are very team-friendly. He's making less than $30 million, and you can extend him for, say, 8 years, and then his contract starts to kick in after this 2 to 3 year window that you have with DeAndre Hopkins, with Christian Kirk, with AJ Green and JJ Watt and company. If that's what you want to do, you do it. But he's going to get his money. And I think to Tony's point, I think Kyler's pushing now because he sees what happened with Lamar. Lamar got hurt twice in this 5 years that he's been with Baltimore. And I think that's going to hurt. Should it or should it not? Fair or unfair? It could hurt Lamar Jackson. And he's saying, what if I get hurt again? And what if it's not just something I miss 2 games for? What if something I miss a year for? How much does my bottom line get affected now? I wanted to lock myself up. Kyler Murray, I think we know doesn't have this ceiling where of Dak Prescott. I think with Dak Prescott, there's only so much you can do with Dak. I think Kyler exceeds it. I think he has a better arm. I think he's more mobile. And I do think he's played better than Dak has really since his rookie year. And you also play in the NFC West. The division is not getting easier, right? You still have to deal with the Rams. They're going to have Matthew Stafford. If Trey Lance is the future, he's going to be there. If it's Jimmy Garoppolo for another year, you're still going to deal with the Niners, no matter who the quarterback is. The Seahawks, if they keep Russell Wilson, you're still going to be there. You have your window of, say, 2 years. If he wants to really be locked up and doesn't really care about the money right now, you can say, hey, look, we'll give you this Mahomes-like deal. You could do what Joe said. Here's 225 laid out over 8 years. These first 2 years are going to be team-friendly. They're going to be, $29 million, $28 million, and then you'll see your $35 to $40 million spread out for the next however long.
Mm-hmm. The biggest issue with all of this, and it's the one that we don't want to talk about, but we always talk about, it's his size and his injuries. And it's unfair because we don't talk about big quarterbacks that way. We laud guys like Ben Roethlisberger who played hurt because he was big. We laud guys like Josh Allen who run down the field and take huge hits from linebackers. But anytime Kyler scrambles, people say, well, that's why you got to worry. That's why you got to worry about Lamar. That's why you got to worry about these guys. And it's an unfair thing, but it's true. Like, I'm sorry, the NFL is a league of uncomfortable truths. And the uncomfortable truth with Kyler Murray is if he is healthy and you can guarantee his health, there's probably not 5 quarterbacks in the league that you would take over him. There just isn't. Age, everything. There just isn't. But the problem is we live in an imperfect world. Sorry to break that to you, Tony. I know you usually, you're very optimistic about things, but I hate to bring it to you, but we live in an imperfect world, and the NFL is an imperfect league. And Kyler Murray, like it or not, is an imperfect quarterback. And the question is always comes down to value. The team wants value out of their quarterback. Yes, everybody's like, well, the salary cap's going to jump up $30 million in 2 years. Cool. Quarterback isn't the only position that's going to want more money. Left tackles are going to want more money. Linebackers, safeties, tight ends, wide receivers are all going to want more money. So yeah, it's cool to have the big number next to your name. But as we've talked about on the show before, Tony, as much as you don't like him, Tom Brady, not the highest grossing quarterback of all time. But you know what? He walked away with the most Academy Awards.
Yep. Yeah, I think the one that made I think Eli is actually the one that career-wise made the
the most career earnings, yeah.
That's just crazy. And I will say, for you saying that I'm optimistic, I'm probably one of the most pessimistic people in the real world anyway.
Oh, did you not catch the sarcasm? I'm sorry. I should have, yeah.
See, I'm not that smart. I will say I do agree with Joe because and I'll even say this, and you guys can tell me what you think. When you look at Lamar and Kyler, they're kind of like what people are saying about, Jay Morant right now. They're small, not just height, in build. These are guys that look like me, like they're skinny, and you see them and it's like, okay, I've got Kyler Murray, like 5'9", maybe 200 pounds. And I've got like 6'6", 325 pounds of raw aggression in JJ Watt about to smack the ever loving hell out of you. Like, yeah, no, that doesn't mix. And I think because Kyler and Lamar are so athletic too, on top of it, like for some of these DBs, for some of these linebackers, you have to go as hard and as fast as you can and just hope that you hit them. Because if you can, you're making a big play, you're stopping them. But if not, then, you're getting burned for, 50, 60 yards, whatever it is. And I think because, we see him scramble, which Dustin brought this up on the morning show last week. And I kind of alluded to it too. Especially in the Cardinals' red uniforms, he looks like a little angry toddler running around in like footy pajamas. And
he holds the ball with one hand out here like this.
Mm-hmm. and every meme that you see, it's like Kyler has like a normal football head with like a ball, and then he's just like this big as he's running around the entire field. And it does suck that we have to occlude to size. But I will say this, that's kind of on them for not really bulking up. You still make millions of dollars, whether you're on your rookie deal or not, and you have all off season. Get bigger, get with a nutritional, not saying you have to be this, extremely athletic, muscle bound gerbil that, basically walks on your knuckles, but like, you could put some meat on your bones and
I
then
felt like that was a personal shot at me.
no. But it's like, yes, are you probably going to lose some speed, or you kind of probably lose what you're known for? Yes. But are you going to be able to potentially develop yourself a little bit better as a pocket passer, maybe kind of step in the pocket, maybe take some of those hits? Yeah, they're still going to hurt because you're going to get hit by basically a moving semi truck, but you're not going to be able to miss, 2 or 3 games because you did that. You'd be like, crap, that hurt. All right, let me keep going, instead of, again, I equivalent it to the RG3 thing. Like he reminds me a lot of RG3, super talented, can run the ball. And all it does take that one hit because you scramble, or because you're trying to do too much, and your career's over because you lose your knee.
And the other one to look at is Michael Vick. And I say Michael Vick because
too.
Michael Vick has openly spoken about when he was a young quarterback, coaches and other people around the league told him, Mike, you need to learn how to become a quarterback, a passer of the ball. All the other stuff is great. Think of it as the cherry on the sundae. But if you can't do a 3 or 5 or 7 step drop, go through your progressions and get the ball out, you will only have a certain shelf life. Now, to his credit, after prison and stuff, he did improve as a quarterback. He went with Andy Reid. He was a backup in Pittsburgh. He was a starter in Philadelphia. He did have that. But he even said, he goes, if I would have focused on football earlier, and we know what he was focusing on at least some of the time, then his career is totally different. And it doesn't matter how many of these guys come out and say it. Like Michael Vick is literally the number 1 overall pick, the same, body type, slender guy, ran around, had a really strong arm, same as Lamar, same as Kyler. And he literally, you could go see a billion interviews he's done where he's basically looking at those guys and saying, guys, do not do what I did. And they're just kind of like, nah, we're going to do what we want to do.
Yeah. And I think that goes to, you look at now how much the league has changed. You have so much better athletes, but again, a lot of times you either have to match speed with, slendered speed, because you think of a guy like TJ Watt, and a lot of people compare him to like LT. Well, you have to think LT kind of matched size and speed both. Like he had the perfect balance. TJ Watt's kind of the same, but I think TJ relies a little bit more on speed. And you kind of notice with the Watt brothers, they tend to be hurt a little bit more, because to me, they don't focus as much on technique and strength as they do on quick bursts, quick cuts to get off the ball. And I think the same goes for the quarterback, because Joe's exactly right. I've seen the interviews with Mike Vick. He's like, look, because you think about it, who is Mike Vick always said he, kind of mimicked his game after, Randall Cunningham, Warren Moon, these, again, quarterbacks that were mobile, but it's like they never really learned how to be quarterbacks. And it's like Joe
Warren
said,
did. Warren did. Randall got the shaft, but Warren did. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, to me, it's like you can be a running quarterback, and we've seen it succeed. But if anything, if I'm them, if you want to get more recent to a quarterback that's had success, and now look at what's happened to him, Cam Newton, perfect example. Kept putting it. Now, to Cam's point, he is a big boy, and he put a lot of his body on the line, but he still played with that same mentality. And that's part of why it's like, I'm not saying just because you're bigger that, just because you can take a hit doesn't mean you necessarily need to. Because if you don't need to take an unnecessary hit, don't take an unnecessary hit, throw the ball away or something. I don't care. But yeah, that to me is what I think they should do, is they need to look at, I need to be, and I'm not saying you always have to be a pocket passer, but you have to be quick about it. You have to be smart about it. And again, that's one thing I will give Russ. I think Russ is one of the few that has taken this and is like, this is what I need to do. I don't know. Joe is not a fan of Russ. I know. But you can't say, for again, a quarterback in his position for the last 10 years, has Russ really dropped off, at least from a statistical point? Has he dropped off?
I choose not to debate.
He's pleading the fifth. Here.
He is. All right, so we'll move into our last topic of the night. So obviously we've seen, because there are always going to be teams that are quarterback hungry. And we have organizations like Detroit, Jacksonville, the Jets, the Giants. They churn through quarterbacks like melted butter. Like it's sad how many quarterback careers have died because of crappy organizations. So here's the list of the 2022 NFL Combine quarterbacks, and quarterbacks are going to be available in the draft. You have Jack Cohn from Notre Dame, Matt Corral from Ole Miss, Dustin Crum from Kent State, Caleb Elby from Western Michigan, Sam Howell from North Carolina, Cole Kelly, Derek King from Miami, Kenny Pickett from Pitt, Brock Purdy from Iowa State, Desmond Ritter from Cincinnati, Carson Strong from Nevada, Skylar Thompson from Kansas State, Malik Willis from Liberty, Bailey Zapp from Western Kentucky, and EJ Perry from Brown. So, Amon, I'll start with you. If you could pick 3 franchises for 3 of these quarterbacks to go to that you think would have success, what would those 3 quarterbacks be, and where would you put them?
So first off, I'd start with Matt Corral, and I'd go to Tampa. I think Matt Corral in Tampa is just a match made in heaven. This kid has an arm. He's not the biggest arm in the draft. I think Malik Willis has the biggest arm in this draft. But Matt Corral, he's a kid who out of high school was in the same class as Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. We don't talk about those guys' arms. Everyone said coming out of high school, this kid had the most raw arm talent in that entire class, that class of 2017. And I know the leg injury is going to scare a couple of people away, but he can sit, right? If you're Tampa and you don't get Aaron Rodgers, you don't get Russell Wilson, you don't get any of these big name quarterbacks, you play Blaine Gabbert for a year. Is Kyle Trask your guy? I don't know. But Matt Corral, we know he can push the ball deep. He sees the field with great vision, and we know he can see one read, and if it's not there, we know he can take off and get down. He did some great stuff his senior year. I thought he was better his junior year, even though statistically it wasn't quite there. But Matt Corral in Tampa, to me, again, he's a guy who can get through his reads pretty quickly and then also can light the ball up downfield. I like him if he can get into a place like Tampa Bay where they like to throw the ball down the field and air raid offense. The next guy that I have to shout out is Sam Howell. Sam Howell out of North Carolina. I got to support my North Carolina brethren, as I told Joe earlier today about Russell Wilson. A lot of people are going to compare him to Mitchell Trubisky, fair or unfair, because of the North Carolina thing. I'll let you know right now, I've watched both of them play. Nothing like Mitchell Trubisky, more of a Chase Daniel or a Baker Mayfield kind of mold. And I think that if you give him time to sit, he can be something that you can work with. And for that, I picked Cleveland because I don't know what you have. And I don't think he is going to be a first round guy anyway. So if you can wait till the second or third round and end up in Cleveland where you're going to have, a similar type of system that's built around Baker, I think that could be something. If they don't like Baker Mayfield, this kid, doesn't get hurt. It's a little bit bigger, doesn't move around as much, climbs the pocket well, utilizes receiver, a great leader. Again, it could be too close to Baker where they don't want to go with it. They might want to go in a different direction. But that was the other thing I said with Sam Howell. And then I picked Malik Willis for New Orleans. I think New Orleans still has a load of talent. Kid has a huge arm. You can sit there, feed it out. And I think Dennis Allen would love to have a young quarterback to build around. And even I said I was between them and Pittsburgh. I was between the Saints and the Pittsburgh Steelers because Steelers need a quarterback. I just thought New Orleans has a lot more talent. They run the ball especially well. Malik Willis is kind of Mahomes-ish in the sense that he is very raw, has an incredible arm, but there's some mechanical inconsistencies there. Again, you sit him, let him learn. He's not going to be ready year 1, but by year 2, year 3, he could be a guy that could be lighting it up.
Okay. Joe, what about you?
I'm going to piggyback off for your last quarterback there, Malik Willis, coming out of Liberty. Everything you said is absolutely right. I think of him as like a Patrick Mahomes draft pick. I think of him as an Aaron Rodgers draft pick, all the arm talent in the world, but he wasn't ready to start from day one. So it makes sense to go to a team where he doesn't have to start from day one, but can be the future. That team is the Minnesota Vikings. I think taking him at 12 would be a genius move. You're either going to trade Kirk Cousins and get a haul because, believe it or not, people in the league do like Kirk Cousins. And then you do not have to start him right away. And he has a chance to learn. I think he fits perfectly with what they're doing. Justin Jefferson down the field. I think you're going to see them. They've invested in the defense. They've invested in the offensive line. It is a young team with some nice veterans. They're going to come up. So I would love to see Minnesota be matched up with Malik Willis. Kenny Pickett from the University of Pittsburgh. A lot of people consider him the number 1 consensus quarterback. I struggled with this, but I think a place that makes sense, it's actually a team you mentioned him on. I think it's Cleveland. He's 6'3", 217. I think if you're going to move off Baker, you go in the opposite direction. He played at Pitt, so he's not afraid of that weather. Western Pennsylvania is not that different from Northeast Ohio, save for a couple of inches of snow in the wintertime. So I think that's a guy, again, it's really hard to sell your franchise on taking the number 1 draft pick just a few years ago on a rookie deal, taking another quarterback. Pickett will not be there, but we're not playing that. We're playing best matches. And for me, the third one is Derek King. I asked about him earlier in the chat because he was a guy I kind of remember people talking about, and then all of a sudden nothing. And you guys had kind of informed me on that. So to me, he should go to a team with a veteran quarterback, somebody who isn't necessarily solid in their starting position and can learn, kind of that Dak Prescott mold or that Kirk Cousins mold, where they come in and they're not going to be the number 1 guy, but if they have to come in relief, they've got kind of this moxie about them. The team for me is the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff is not the starter. There's not talks about Jared Goff, getting replaced in 2022. Like, they're not going to take a quarterback. What are they? Number 2 pick in the draft. Like, they're probably going to take Hutchinson. They're probably going to take an offensive lineman. So to me, I put King in Detroit. Is the perfect evolution of beard growth. It is really. But again, I put him in Detroit because guess what? You know what bad cities, bad teams love? They love the backup quarterback. You're going to sell yourself on King. Hey, he played at Alabama. Hey, if he wouldn't have gotten hurt, Miami really could have done something. Hey, if he can just get in there, he can really do something. The city will fall in love with him within 1 year. So I think King to Detroit makes a lot of sense too.
Okay. I'm actually going to throw a couple names out there that you guys didn't mention, and I think it's mainly because of the style that they played this year in college football and what they've played with in the long run. So my first is going to be Desmond Ritter out of Cincinnati. I think, honestly, the perfect team for him to go to would be New Orleans. And I say that because, to me, Cincinnati kind of reminds me of New Orleans, and the fact of they have a very good defense. That's one of the few things that they do really well. And he's able to make use of what weapons that he's got there. I think with New Orleans, their big thing is they're going to have to retool their wide receiver room, especially with Michael Thomas just being up in the air. Now, if they don't, I feel like that actually gives him a very decent weapon to work with, as well as, they're probably still going to rely on the run game. They still have a very good offensive line. It's very young. And again, with the defensive side of the ball, he's going to be solid. So I think really for a place for him to grow, I think for a city that's going to be looking for a new franchise quarterback to try and fill Drew Brees' shoe, maybe Desmond Ritter could be that guy. And again, I think it's one of those, it would be one of the safer options to go with as far as somebody that, he plays at a school that's not a Power 5. And sometimes that's where you get your best quarterbacks out of is those programs that do that. So I think he would be very moldable and very malleable to work with. The other one would be Brock Purdy from Iowa State. And it's going to sound crazy. And I'm going to sound really, really crazy for this. I think, to me, one of the best places he could probably go would honestly be Atlanta. Where were you hoping, Joe?
I don't want to say.
No, zero. Where are you going to say?
I was hoping you'd say Green Bay. I just wanted to hear it.
No,
I wanted to hear it.
No. Well, and here's why I say this, because when and this kind of goes back to our Big 12 thing. What is a team that they're almost always there? Like, they always make noise, and it's one of those, again, it's one of the few college programs that's always consistent. Like, they're never bad, they're never like super great, but they are good and they can make some noise, and they play some pretty decent opponents a lot of times. That's Iowa State, and that's Brock Purdy. I think the two Iowa programs are probably the best as far as they make it work with what they've got. Again, he's not going to be one of those, like, he's not going to be a big name that's going to come out of there that I think a lot of people are going to expect. And for some reason, him going to Atlanta, I feel like kind of puts him in the same situation with Iowa State, because you're in a wide open division. You don't know what New Orleans is going to do. You don't know what Carolina is doing. Tampa has to figure out their quarterback situation. Now, if Tampa can figure out the quarterback situation, that's a totally different story. Then it's Tampa's division wholeheartedly, up and down. But I think that puts him in a very easily a very good spot in a team that I think is ready to rebuild, and I think would be very open to him, because, I mean, you got to think about it. This is an Atlanta team that, aside from really, Matt Ryan and Michael Vick, when have they really had that big franchise quarterback that they're like, this is our guy that we can get behind.
Scott Chandler just entered the chat.
Yeah.
He was a quarterback on many years ago.
I know Scott Chandler. Don't worry. I got some information.
And then honestly, I feel like, again, this guy, and I say this because Colin Cowherd brought it up, and I felt like it was a really good point. Kenny Pickett still, to me, is this year really the year that everything clicked? You got to think, and Amon and I were talking about this before the show, he's either a fourth or he's a fifth-year senior. And it didn't click until your very last year in a not great conference. Like, you don't have to worry about Clemson anymore. Like, Clemson has exited the conversation. Like, the ACC is open. Take your pick again. So it's like you couldn't really do anything in the ACC. And what is the biggest thing that we know Kenny Pickett for? The whole
fake slide.
Fake slide kneel thing. It's like, try that in the NFL and watch what happens. Obviously, I think there's a lot of people that have him going. I think Pittsburgh is supposed to be like one of the heavy favorites to get him because I think they want to try to keep the hometown kid in Pittsburgh. So I mean, I don't think that would necessarily be bad for him. The fact of it's going to be a well-run organization. You're going to have a decent head coach. Again, their offense is what's going to make me really question it because, you do have Chase Claypool, who was solid at least his rookie year. He's kind of quiet last year a little bit, but I think a lot of that's due to he has to be the number one because TikTok boy is, dancing on people's logos and whatnot, getting the crap smacked out of him. And, Juju has fallen off since Antonio Brown left. Like, somebody pointed it out. It's like he hasn't had a single 100-yard receiving game since Antonio Brown left. No. And I think that speaks volumes to the impact that Antonio Brown makes as compared to him. I can give y'all two people that I know aren't going to do well in the NFL. That's Skylar Thompson. And one for sure is Jack Cohn. My goodness, if nobody watches college football, I watched this kid at Wisconsin. He was garbage. And then for whatever reason, Notre Dame was like, we need a quarterback. Jack, come on in. And then what's he do? Gets benched in the middle of the season because he's hot garbage. So it's like, you actually know what, Jack Cohn, you know what? No, I'm wrong. Go to Detroit. Go be the next franchise quarterback for Detroit. Go battle with your other half in Jared Goff. You'll be perfect. Like,
Jack Cohn sounds like the name of a detective on the new show CSI Albuquerque.
I could see that, or I could even see like a detective on like Law and Order SVU. It's like, Detective Jack Cohn.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
I mean, Yoel just typed in, Pickett has a good pedigree, but I'm not sure he's a first-round draft pick. That's the thing. I've read so much stuff online that are like, listen, we've graded these guys out. There's not a quarterback above the third round. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to see 4 first-round quarterbacks. Like,
I guarantee you Carolina will take a quarterback at 12. Like, that's the crazy part. They'll probably reach for one at 12.
Like, that's it's absolutely insane. And it also goes to show like how inexact all this is, because last year we talked about these quarterbacks. Like, Denver should have taken a quarterback. Carolina should have taken a quarterback. Carolina takes J.C. Horn. Denver takes Patrick Surtain Jr. And then we see Justin Fields go after him. Mac Jones go after him. All this stuff. And now, wouldn't Denver and Carolina really like to have Mac Jones and Justin Fields? Like, of course they would, but that's not the way that it works. So now you have this bad quarterback class where you again have high draft picks, but guess what? Now you're left with, as Tony said, hot garbage.
Yeah, and that was probably the thing that surprised me. Even as a Cowboys fan, like, I'm not upset that we got Micah Parsons because thankfully he ended up actually panning out, at least his rookie year. I hope that continues because Jalen Smith panned out for the first year and then that went to crap. With Vander Esch. So it's like, I hope Micah pans out. But yeah, it's like, when I saw Carolina take J.C. Horn, I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense because, they have a lot of the young pieces on defense. They have Jeremy Chin. They had Hassan Reddick. They had Brian Burns. I'm like, okay, they're trying to show we are going to be a defensive team first. I'm like, I can 1,000% get behind that. Get you a young corner to lock down. I can respect that. And then, Denver comes up, and I'm like, okay, Denver's obviously going to take a quarterback. Like, this is where we see Justin Fields go.
Yeah.
This is where we see, Mac Jones go. And it's like, they're going to take Patrick Surtain. As a Cowboys fan, I'm like, but why? Like, Dallas was going to do that. Like, he knew Dallas was going to do that.
That's why they took it. That's
Probably, yeah. It's like, screw Dallas. But I'm like, but that's not really a position that you guys need. Like, you guys have shown, you guys have either a decent enough cornerbacks coach or just a decent enough, turnaround in coaching that you can teach people how to be a cornerback. Like, you've had great corners come through there. You had Aqib Talib. You had TJ Ward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason for Denver I understood it afterwards because if you saw him, like, he obviously looks like a number one corner. And we know that the NFL, especially in the AFC West, when you're going against Herbert and Mahomes and Carr and these guys who throw, you need cornerbacks. It's the same thing in the NBA where they're like, we just need centers. We need bodies to throw at, Giannis and all. It's like, okay, we just need cornerbacks to throw at pass catchers. We don't care if he's going to cover Kelsey or Hardman or Hill or whoever. We just need somebody.
Yeah, and
you can't have Drew Lock back there throwing for you either. You got to find him. You got to find.
Well, that's the other thing.
Well, and again, that's where it's like, if you look at the drafts, like how many drafts has there ever been where you're like, there's not really a whole lot of good corners in here. Like not saying there's these all pro all stars like Patrick Surtain. Like he really is one of those few. Like for sure he's a number one corner when you see him. But it's like, yeah, and that's great, but you can find a lot of those, or you can find guys that are like decent enough to be able to compete. Obviously, you can't find a quarterback like that because you literally find John Elway finds the tallest broom, and he's like, I like it because it's tall. That's my starting quarterback. I mean, really, John, you haven't had a quarterback since yourself and Peyton Manning. You haven't had one.
John, that guy looks like a mop. I know. I like it.
Yeah. Anthony, you said 4 QBs might come out of the first round, but who are the 4? So I think we're all in kind of general consensus. Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis are definitely going to probably be your top 2 quarterbacks that come out.
I keep hearing about Sam Howell. I
think Matt Corral would be the other one.
Corral is probably the 3rd.
And we might see 5. I mean, we saw Baltimore trade back into the 1st to get Lamar Jackson. You're telling me a team like think about it. Cincinnati's at 31. Who would have thought Cincinnati's at 31? If a quarterback is sitting there and they don't want to wait for day 2, we know that they need players. We know they need cheap assets. Why wouldn't Cincinnati trade out of the back end of the 1st round? If Desmond Ritter is sitting there and somebody likes him, something like that, why wouldn't a team trade up with him? So, I mean, you could see some action in the back half of the 1st round where one of these quarterbacks, we could see 5.
And honestly, you could even see a team too that says, hey, we don't need a starting quarterback, but we need a backup quarterback. We're all about, you take the Rams, for example. Say they're like, hey, Matt is older. Like, we knew what we were getting with Matt. Yeah, we need to potentially be prepared for the future. We got a 2nd round pick. These guys are still going to be on the board. We'll draft him. Like,
let's not forget, Joe Flacco was the quarterback for the Ravens whenever Lamar Jackson was taken. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Again, we talked about Detroit. Why wouldn't Detroit, instead of waiting, for the 2nd round, why wouldn't they trade up a few picks to go get a quarterback to possibly replace Jared Goff?
And especially because they have 2 and they're sitting there at 32, they might be like, hey, we can trade up. We got a 1st round pick we can give you, and we still have the number 2 overall pick. So we can get our guy that we want. Anything else is just extra bonus at this point. Because they also have the Rams picks to negotiate with too.
It's going to be a madhouse of quarterbacks. There's so many reaches are going to happen. I mean, and if we're looking at it objectively, 2nd round is probably where you're looking at most of these guys falling in any other draft class, if that. But you're going to see it's going to be chaos.
And I think
go ahead. Sorry, Tony.
Yeah, sorry. And I think that's kind of the bad part about the NFL now. Like, how much people are just really trying to find that next franchise guy, because you think about it, back in the day, these guys would be, oh, hey, with like the 78th pick, the Steelers select Kenny Pickett out of Pitt, and everybody be like, okay, this is actually a solid pick. Like, he can learn, maybe if, it works out in preseason or camp, he could potentially be your first starter, like that type of thing. And I think now people are so focused on, well, we have to get the quarterback situation right. yes, but I kind of like the old school mentality of have pieces built, like get an offensive line fixed. Like, look, we can have the quarterback all we want, but if it's like Joe Burrow and he's getting hit every 10 seconds, it's not worth it.
Not many guys built like Joe Burrow, to survive 50 sacks.
And honestly, take the Colts, for example. Like, yes, you went out and got Andrew Luck. That was an extremely smart pick. I'm not going to doubt that at all. But you didn't do anything to build around him or be prepared for him. Like, and that to me is the mistake.
Yeah, I think and I know we're running over here, but I think one of the biggest things is we've seen everybody talks about Patrick Mahomes. Like Patrick Mahomes is going to rule the AFC. Listen, we've learned one thing through the history of football, especially modern football, which I consider since basically 2000. The only way to beat great quarterbacks is to have great teams. Because guess what? There aren't that many great quarterbacks. So you have to have great teams. I mean, you don't want to draft too high and end up like 49ers. True. But let's not forget, the 49ers went to the Super Bowl because they had a great team. Colin Kaepernick, for his abilities, was not a top quarterback in the league. He was freakishly great in the playoffs, but he was not what you considered a top 5 quarterback. But they had a great team.
Athlete. But he was not a great quarterback.
Yeah. When they went with Jimmy G, we talked about the pass rush, and we talked about the defense, and we talked about the run game, and we talked about George Kittle. They were competitive in the Super Bowl because they had a great team. So these high teams, these high draft picks, like you guys said, you're chasing the elite quarterback. Sorry, guys, there's not that many. And that's where we get into the whole Hall of Fame thing about guys who are great. You can put up great numbers. That doesn't mean you're a great quarterback. There's only so many of them. And you have to be willing. And again, we're critical of Denver and Carolina, but if in 3 years Denver looks and they get their quarterback, but they have these pieces from the draft, if they have Patrick Surtain as their number 1 corner, we can look back and say, boy, you know what? It was kind of smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And then, of course, I do want to highlight this from Brandon. Don't hesitate to reach out to him about the knowledge, the facts, and the information. We appreciate that. And we have great voices for radio. So, I mean, I already got told earlier I look like a poster boy for an apparent group, which will remain nameless, a.k.a. Harry Potter reference.
My mother said I always had a great face for radio, so it makes sense.
Hey, face that only a mother could love. But it's been another great show. It's been a great night as always. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you guys to everybody that commented, everybody that listened. Please like, share, and subscribe to us. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. Eventually we're going to move over to Roku, Apple TV, Tiki Live, all these different TV streamings. We also have an Anchor as well. So if maybe you don't want to see our faces and, we have a great face for radio, like great voices. We do have an Anchor account as well. So you can catch us on Spotify. You can catch us on pretty much every podcasting platform that you can think of. But again, Amon, thank you for joining me. Definitely appreciate it. Joe, thank you as always. Glad you could make it. Again, Amon and I were really worried. You were just reaching as you're slowly fading away in the background. Just save yourself. Just go on without me. We're really worried. And then, like I said, you'll catch me in the B-rated version of Super Troopers here, in a few weeks. The film will come out. So
you guys' mustaches are really adorable. I remember when I first went through puberty.
Hey, in my defense, work says I can't grow anymore. Okay.
My genetics say I can't, so that's my excuse.
You've got that luscious mane, Amon. You're winning in life, Mutt. But okay, you're winning.
Look, Amon can have the long hair. You can have the beard. I have the childlike face that religion loves. So it's fine. But everybody have a great night, though. It's been another great show. Catch us again next week on Wednesday nights. And y'all have a good night. If I can find what I'm looking for.
All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making up plays. We talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.